What's happening, people? My name is goukigod, and in this video I wanted to discuss the games, tech, and everything else that I'm looking forward to on the gaming front in 2017. Now 2016 was a pretty good year for me. It was full of games that I'd either been waiting for a really long time for or was just really hyped about. So it was always going to be a tall order to top 2016. Now there definitely aren't as many things that I'm excited for this year compared to the beginning of 2016. But having said that, there are a ton of things that I'm really looking forward to. There's also a bunch of games that could be awesome, but I'm kind of waiting to see how they turn out before I get hyped. So games like Shenmue, Marvel vs. Capcom, God of War, and Gran Turismo could all be really cool, but they also have the potential to be really bad, which is why they're not on my hype list. So I'm not going to be covering everything that I'm excited for in this video because that would take 3 hours. I'm just going to focus on the big things. So in no particular order, this is what I'm looking forward to in 2017. Uncharted 4 was my favourite game of last year, so you could say that I'm pretty damn excited for The Lost Legacy. Now this is not a direct expansion of Uncharted 4's campaign, it's actually been described as a standalone story in the Uncharted universe. And at this stage it's unclear if the events tie in at all to the events in Uncharted 4, or even if it's set at the same point in time. It sounds like it's going to be a lot like The Last of Us Left Behind standalone DLC, and just like that DLC, it's going to be available as a standalone game that you can either purchase on a disc or download that you don't need Uncharted 4 to play. Having said that, I do think it would be cool if there was some kind of reward for people that own Uncharted 4, but I guess we'll just have to wait and see if that actually happens. What we do know for sure is that it's going to include the same kind of experience that the Uncharted games are known for, so cinematic storytelling, exotic destinations, combat and puzzles have all been promised, and according to Naughty Dog, it's the biggest story expansion that they've done to date. Based on the gameplay demo shown at the PlayStation Experience event last year, you appear to play as Chloe, but it also includes Nadine from Uncharted 4, so it's unclear if she'll be a playable character or not. I have to say that I'm pretty excited to see her included, as I thought she was such an interesting character from Uncharted 4, and she really wasn't given enough backstory or screen time. Now, Uncharted 4 was supposed to be the last game to feature Nathan Drake as the protagonist, so maybe this is the first attempt at a new game in the franchise without him. I'd definitely be keen to play more Uncharted games, and I don't even mind the idea of Drake not being the main character, or even not being in them at all. I think using Chloe as the lead is an interesting idea, and I just wonder if it's an attempt to capitalize on the success of the recent Tomb Raider games. It's hard not to draw comparisons between Lara Croft and Chloe's appearance. You can definitely see ideas that have been borrowed between both franchises, and despite both games being quite different in tone, they're definitely trying to capture a similar market. Anyway, I am pretty damn hyped for The Lost Legacy, and I cannot wait for it to come out.
Hold on. What's your rush?
The timing really couldn't be any better for Red Dead Redemption to have a sequel, as it's been about 4 years since the release of Grand Theft Auto 5. We know almost nothing about this new game, and it's likely to stay that way until Rockstar decide to feed us some more info, and Rockstar are pretty damn good at keeping secrets, so I say that we're not going to see much until close to launch. Based on the promotional imagery and also the teaser that's been released, it looks like there's a lot of new characters. It also looks like there might be the possibility to play as different characters in the same way that you could in Grand Theft Auto 5. Now for sure the game world will definitely be bigger than the previous one. Based on the teaser, there appears to be a wide range of landscapes and climates, and Rockstar pretty much try to outdo themselves with every new game, and also improve the sense that the world is a living, breathing place. Now Red Dead Redemption already had an amazing feeling of being lived in, so I can't wait to see what Rockstar have done with this game. I think what I really like about Red Dead Redemption is that it's less wacky than Grand Theft Auto, and the story and characters for the most part were pretty interesting. I feel like it managed to be a much more serious game without losing that same cynical humor that Rockstar are so well known for. The side missions were also really good, and I actually found them more interesting than a lot of the main storyline. In particular, I really loved hunting for buried treasure, and that each new treasure essentially led to a new harder treasure to find. That was actually my biggest issue with the game. I sunk roughly 40 hours into it, and I had only completed about 10% of the campaign when my game save was lost. To be perfectly honest, I think a lot of that time was also spent looking for the DeLorean out of Back to the Future 3, but I regret nothing with my time spent in that game. Now the final thing which has got me really interested for this game is what they do with the multiplayer. To be perfectly honest, I felt that the multiplayer in the previous game was kind of boring. I mean, the premise was cool, you create a posse and ride around doing cool cowboy stuff together, but it kind of lacked direction. Considering what's been done with Grand Theft Auto Online, I think this could be a really cool mode. I just hope that it's not purely designed for people who are willing to sink hundreds of hours into it or a ton of real money. Unfortunately, we'll have to wait almost a whole year before it's out and we can find out all the answers to all these questions, but knowing Rockstar, it'll definitely be worth the wait. Now this was actually a game that was on my 2016 most anticipated games list. Friday the 13th, the game is an asymmetrical multiplayer game, a little bit like Evolve in the sense that one player controls an overpowered character and 4 other players control much weaker characters that need to work together in order to win. Now, like I said, this was supposed to launch in 2016, but it was delayed until this year for a couple of reasons, but the main one was to add a campaign, which to be fair seems like a pretty good reason to delay the game. Now, they're actually splitting the release a little bit like Street Fighter V, where the campaign will come out sometime after launch. And I think at this point the campaign is supposed to come out towards the end of the year. Now, to be perfectly honest, I'm a little worried about how it's going to turn out, as the most recent beta footage that I've been watching isn't really all that impressive. I haven't played it myself, but it does look kind of janky with lots of graphical problems like clipping issues, and there's some pretty wonky looking animations too. Now, I understand that it's still in the beta stage, so this could all be sorted by launch, and I also understand that the studio behind it don't have a huge budget. And I really don't mind if it isn't the best looking game, just so long as it controls well and the underlying design is solid. I will say that it is shaping up to be pretty violent though. All the kill animations for Jason are pretty damn brutal, so here's hoping that the tone of the game is still reasonably light-hearted. Now that might sound like an odd request, but the movies were pretty cheesy and they didn't take themselves too seriously, so I think that's an important element that needs to be carried over. Anyway, as a huge fan of 80s and 90s slasher flicks and horror games, I still have high hopes for this. I really like the concept behind the game design too, that there's essentially 2 different types of experiences and styles of gameplay. If you're playing as Jason, you're really overpowered and can terrorize the other players, but as a counselor, the experience will be the opposite. And it really has the potential to be terrifying, as you never know when Jason might appear, and you really need to coordinate and work together to survive. I think ultimately the success of the game will really depend on how much fun it is to play as a counselor. I think playing as Jason will definitely be fun, and he should be difficult to deal with, but I think the counselors should have lots of ways to slow him down and escape. I guess my biggest concern is that it ends up being like Evolve. With that game, I only liked really playing as the monster because playing as the humans was kind of boring. If your team wasn't working well together, then even a really average monster player could really dominate. I think having fun while playing as a counselor, even if your team aren't working together, will be really important, as you can pretty much count on at least 1 or 2 players in the lobby going rogue. Anyway, I've already paid for it, so either way I'm going to be playing it when it comes out sometime early this year, so I'll give you my full thoughts in a review close to launch. Now, from one scary game to another. After Resident Evil 5, I kind of lost interest in the series. I did enjoy parts of the game, but it wasn't particularly scary, and from a gameplay point of view, it was pretty different to the earlier games. The earlier games were really spooky too, and based on the demos that I've played, it really seems like this new game has gone back to its roots in this regard. Obviously, the game is now presented in the first person, which is a pretty big departure from the previous games, but just about all horror games are presented in this format now. I think this is because it limits your field of view and makes for a more terrifying experience. It's also cool that you'll be able to play the whole thing in VR if that's your bag or if you own a headset. It also might help encourage other big games to provide a complete VR experience rather than just the tech demos that we've been seeing. The other reason that I'm excited for this is that I was really looking forward to the new Silent Hills game based on the playable teaser. When that was cancelled, my focus shifted to another game which was also in my most anticipated games of last year, and that game was Allison Road, and it looked like it took a lot of inspiration from PT. Unfortunately, that also got cancelled, but this new Resident Evil game might just scratch the same itch that PT did. There's clearly a lot of influence taken from PT in the new Resident Evil. I don't think it's anywhere near as creepy based on the demos that I've played, but that's fine. I think this new game needs to have its own personality. Anyway, it launches at the end of January, so we really don't have that long to wait. Now, say what you will about the first attempt at a Battlefront game by DICE, but I really enjoy it. I'll concede that the game was quite light on content at launch, but I think DICE have done a pretty good job propping it up with both paid and free DLC since it launched. As far as the game due out this year goes, there really isn't that much information to go on at this point. We know that it's going to have content from the new movies, which I'm definitely excited for because I've enjoyed both the new films, but apart from that, there's really not that much else confirmed. The CFO of EA was quoted saying that Battlefront 2 will have bigger and better worlds, but obviously that's quite vague and pretty open to interpretation. To me, the most obvious way they could improve the sequel would be to simply add in what most people felt was missing in the original. So a campaign, for example, would be a good place to start. I personally don't mind if there isn't one, although if there is, a co-op campaign would be absolutely amazing. More weapons and weapon attachments / weapon customization would be another obvious area they could improve on, and this is something that I felt was missing from the first game as well. Space battles is another big obvious omission. After playing the Death Star DLC, this is definitely something I feel should be in the new game from day one. I mean, it's not really Star Wars without battles in space. Squads or having the option to have more than one other person in your party as well, I think is an absolute no-brainer. I'd actually like to see more of what was in the paid DLC turn up in the main game. I only recently picked up the Death Star DLC for cheap in the January sales, and I've been really impressed overall. In particular, I like the way that it manages to string multiple modes together. I think it makes for a much more compelling experience than any of the vanilla modes. They could definitely take more ideas from Battlefield in this regard too. I get that they were probably trying to prevent the original Battlefront from feeling like a reskinned Battlefield game, but having a rush or even an operations game type in Battlefront would be absolutely epic. I'd also like to see a game mode which requires the use of vehicles in a more meaningful way than what Walker Assault does. Don't get me wrong, the AT-ATs are cool, but being on rails they can't be positioned differently and they don't really affect the outcome of the match. None of the other vehicles really have much of an impact either, as it's predominantly just infantry-based combat. Having more vehicular-based combat would definitely make the game feel very different. Anyway, even if Battlefront 2 or whatever it ends up being called is just more of the same, I think I'll be happy. The first game has quite a lot of content now if you have all the DLC, including the paid DLC, so I think if the sequel can launch with that amount of content, it will definitely be off to a good start. Now the last thing that I'm looking forward to is VR getting cheaper. Now I'll admit that I haven't been the biggest advocate for VR in the past, but that doesn't mean that I'm not excited about the technology. I think the reason that I've been such a skeptic is because of the price. In Australia at least, you need to spend close to $700 for the cheapest option, which is Sony's headset, and that doesn't even get you any games. Now I know that there's a bunch of free titles, but I think if I'm spending that kind of money, I'd probably want to buy a couple of premium experiences too. The software side of things is really the other big problem that I have with VR right now. At the moment, no one system has access to every VR title, and this is a major headache as the best titles are spread across the Oculus Vive and Sony's headset. If you want to play the best of what VR has to offer, you'd need every single option. The other thing is not a lot of the games at the moment really classify as a proper full game in terms of scope. One of the biggest complaints I hear in reviews is that the games are just too damn short. Batman VR is supposed to be one of the best VR experiences available at the moment, although there's apparently only a couple of hours worth of playtime at the very most once absolutely everything is unlocked. I think as more people buy into VR, developers will start spending more money and time on creating longer and more content-rich games. But I do think in time it'll get there and bigger and better games will definitely be the result. I'm hoping that by the end of 2017 we'll start to see a drop in the price of the hardware. I think if the platform manages to stay profitable, then we could even start seeing version 2s of headsets or cheaper alternatives. Here's hoping anyway. So anyway, that is the large things that I'm looking forward to in 2017. I'm sure there's a bunch of unreleased games as well that I'm not aware of that I'm going to be totally excited for once I hear about them. Like I said, there's a bunch of other stuff that could potentially also be really exciting, but could really go either way. So being the realist that I am, I'm going to be sitting on the fence about those titles until I know more. Anyway, that's enough blabbing from me. Let me know what games and experiences and other stuff that you're looking forward to in 2017. Like I said, I'm sure there's a ton of stuff that I'm not aware about that I'd like to know, so drop all your thoughts and ideas in the comment section below. But other than that, I want to thank you guys for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I'm out.